Hey, remember how we were supposed to be playing the System Shock remake by now? Yeah, it's okay, we've been here a few times. I've honestly lost track of how many. But wouldn't it be cool if there was like another game we could play in the meantime that's essentially the same thing as the remake, even if it's not as pretty? Like a demake? Oh yeah, System Shock is real. I almost forgot about that. System Shock is a classic. Yes, it's a product of its time in some spots, but it's a wholly enjoyable experience with a ton of great moments. The degree of freedom you have in-game was unprecedented, and still is a whole lot more than most games these days give you. It's an excellent sci-fi dungeon crawl, a damn good shooter in the wake of the OG Doom, and a surprisingly intense puzzler on top of it all. Oh yeah, and it's one of the founding games of my favorite niche, and also introduces one of the best video game antagonists ever. Just a quick note here, while I do have the original System Shock, we're going to be playing Night Dive's Enhanced Edition because it looks great, runs fine, and adds some modern creature comforts that we take for granted nowadays. I think you actually get the original version when you buy the Enhanced Edition, so it's kind of a moot point on which you get. Also, the Kex engine is a whole lot easier to record than DOSBox. In System Shock, a hacker gets access to Citadel Station's AI and causes a lot of damage. You can prevent hackers from doing that to your PC by... Just kidding. We don't do that here. Instead, I choose to rely on your support via Patreon to keep making these videos. How about instead of wasting a minute of your life with an ad read, let's take a minute to do something that actually enriches your life. Did you make any New Year's resolutions? How are those going for you? Something I've been doing for the last couple of years is making a more detailed list of overall goals I have, which each contain smaller milestones that help me along the way, but that wasn't quite doing the trick. Plus, you gotta know to do that ahead of time for it to work. What is helping me a lot this time around is to set a date at the end of each month where you check up on your goals. You don't have to do much, just take maybe an hour at most out of a day, and whenever it's convenient for you, and just look through them, see how you did. Then, most importantly, write down what worked for you, what didn't work, how much progress you've made, and what you can do going forward to help better achieve those goals. Sure, NYRs are usually lofty and hard to actually complete, but you can still do a lot of good for yourself trying to stick to them. Best of luck to you all. Let's tackle the biggest hurdle of System Shock. The controls are intimidating. Even on the Enhanced Edition, there's a whole lot going on here, and that's not even the UI, that's just like all your basic key bindings. A lot of folks have said that System Shock is like playing an operating system, and I'd have to agree at least partially. Moving on to a new OS can be intimidating at first, but once you get a feel for the hotkeys, you'll be doing fine. And then once you really know your macros and how things work, you'll be having a ball. It'll be like second nature. System Shock came out about a year after Doom, and it is insane just how much you can do with a hacker. Night Dive's changes to the control setup, namely adding mouse look, which is a lifesaver, make things even more manageable once you get over the shock of just how much control you have. You can not only crouch, but go full prone, and you can lean too. You can even do both at the same time. And then when you pair that with how when you're not using mouse look, you can shoot at any point on the screen, you can pull off some really wild stuff with shooting around corners. Speaking of guns, almost all of them have different types of ammo suited for different enemies, and those that don't, mainly the energy weapons, allow the player to modify their power output to essentially being either rapid-fire laser cannons or energy bazookas. You can also change your ammo type on the fly by unloading your weapon at any time, which also means that if you're low on ammo and happen to find another one of the weapon you're trying to use, you can pick it up, unload the thing, and then toss it. And that's just for the guns. Just about all the stuff you can do with guns, you can do with throwables. Grenades, EMPs, landmines, so on. You can toss landmines around corners by banking them against nearby walls. Use grenades to death warp so long as you've turned the level cyborg conversion off, because if you're low on HP, the resurrector machine, or whatever it's called when it's not turning people into mutants, will give you a pretty good amount of health when you respawn. You can use the EMPs to totally ruin the vibe. Detox stims, which are normally used to negate radiation or biological poisoning, can be used to prematurely end the effects of other stimulants. Why would you do that? Because for one, all stimulants have side effects, such as things getting a little wild when you're using the Berserk stim, or how the stamina up will bottom out your stamina for a while once it wears off, or how the reflex stim isn't so much as actually slowing time as it is just turning on a lag switch in game, which, while instrumental for surviving certain situations, is a little hard on the eyes. And this isn't even counting all the stuff you can do with your cyber cyberware like the jet boots or night vision, which I also found out night vision lets you see cloaked enemies. I almost feel like I'm doing the game a bit of a disservice by not being able to mention everything you can do with all the tools you're given in-game, which are simple by today's standards, but there's so much that it's hard to remember it all even after a fresh playthrough and reviewing my footage. I also know that there's all sorts of cheat strats I didn't end up using because they just didn't fit my playstyle. I really like creeping around the whole like Citadel station and like shooting through like area through area. I really liked the gunplay in this game, which if I don't mention it later is really solid. Like I love it. There's just something about like the weight the weapons have and just how great the sound effects are that just really does it for me. Like it's great. The other thing that might intimidate at first, but later makes the game all the better are the levels. I'm gonna use Doom here again as a point of reference because if there was ever a standard for early 90s computer games, you cannot do much better than Doom. For reference, here are the first 4 levels of episode 1. Now we're going to take the second, third, and fourth levels of Doom and superimpose them over the first level of System Shock. I tried to scale these as best as I can to make sure everything's even, and I left out E1, M1 because that's more of an intentionally small tutorial level. And I know this isn't a perfect one-to-one comparison as the Doom maps have a lot more maps in the long run, but System Shock has you in these much bigger, much more claustrophobic spaces. When we look at these maps side to side instead of on top of each other, we can really see how tightly packed in System Shock is. It very much gives the feel that you indeed are on a space station where open space is at a premium. The levels are also literally stacked on top of each other in a way that ties things together. There's also a good deal of backtracking and being able to explore new areas of old levels later on once you get new abilities and new keycards. But this is all just to give you a sense of how nuts these maps are. The real thing you have to accept here is that you're gonna get lost. Like a lot. Citadel Station is labyrinthine in pretty much all senses of that word, and a lot of it looks pretty samey as you gotta be efficient with your space when you gotta launch all this stuff into low orbit. Even when I was in the late game and getting familiar with all the twists and turns, I'd still find myself getting lost whenever I had to backtrack to medical because, well, I broke all the other surgery beds in the game through various accidents, so that was the only spot for a free heal. That's a thing that can happen, by the way. Be careful with your explosives and your indiscriminate gunfire. Also, it's smart to intentionally not completely destroy the security of the medical level because it's an easy place to farm precious med patches, which, especially in the mid to later game, become very rare. That's a part of the game though. The hacker's in an area that he isn't all too familiar with, and SHODAN is doing whatever she can to stop him from getting to the bridge, which includes breaking elevators and reconfiguring things on the fly. When you're not getting lost or trying to shoot your way through Citadel Station, you'll be doing puzzles. In a more literal sense, these are the little path-making and cable-crossing puzzles, but there's also figuring out how you're supposed to get through each level. This is a far cry from having a crap load of convenient yellow paint or little shiny objects all over where you're supposed to go, and still pretty far off from System Shock's successor, BioShock, where you'll often find strategically placed audio diaries that through sheer luck will tell you exactly what you need to do on the level you're at. Speaking of BioShock, System Shock being its progenitor will mean that you will have some of the staples from both games in the form of not just audio diaries, but email transmissions from people that may or may not still be alive, and SHODAN. SHODAN isn't much interested in helping you though, as she is talking smack. These aren't nearly clear cut as the other games though. I'll give one example that illustrates this well, but won't get too crazy or in depth with it because I don't want to spoil too much stuff outside of plot details. At some point in the game, you're going to need a hazard suit. Okay, simple enough. The problem is that SHODAN has previously issued a bogus station-wide recall on all hazard suits before people realized that she had gone rogue. Lucky for you, one of the guys in research actually held on to his hazard suit anyway. You just need to figure out his locker combination. You're not going to find it on level 2 where the locker is. You will eventually find an audio log a few levels later, which is a message from another guy in the department asking what the code for the locker is because he needs to borrow the suit. He only knows the last digit of the code, which he has mentioned in the auto diary, and he needs the rest. Cool. That brings us down from 1,000 possible codes to 100 codes. Wouldn't you know it though, as we're going deeper and deeper into the station, we find the reply to that message that tells us the code, except the disk is damaged. However, it's uncorrupted enough to tell us the first digit of the code, and that's enough. Now, we go all the way back to the second level, which I believe you might be on level 5 by the time you get the second digit, and we go back to the locker and just brute force through the 10 possible combinations to the locker that we have, get the suit, and we can finally complete the string of tasks we needed to finish the first major objective in the game. Or if that's a little much, you can just pop a ton of detox stims as you like run really fast through the area you need to go through. But that's going to take a lot of farming up, which is about the same amount of time as just going through the game as you were supposed to. And if that sounds like a little much or the puzzles have got you down, you can alter or straight up remove the puzzles from the game at the start. If you really wanted to, through System Shock's difficulty system, you could play it as a walking simulator or something closer to a boomer shooter. No, really, you can turn off combat, puzzles, and even the plot in-game. Now let's take the time to talk about Shodan, who is cool enough to get her own separate section of this video independent of both gameplay and story because, yeah, Shodan is easily one of the best antagonists in a video game. I'll even be so bold as to say that she's kind of watered down later on in System Shock 2 with the whole uneasy alliance you have with her, and that when you play System Shock and Bioshock back to back, you really see Andrew Ryan's roots in Shodan. Shodan is ever present, and she knows where you are at all times. Shodan has had the upper hand as she's in the final stages of her plans, whereas you just woke up from a medically induced coma and have no idea what's going on at Citadel Station. Shodan's got complete control of the station, and she's using that to her advantage. For instance, just because you have the code to a certain door or know where a hidden door is, she can still lock you out of it because she's got control of the station's security. That leads to the secondary thing you gotta do to take down Shodan while you're making sure she can't glass planet Earth or mutate all the life on it. Disable the station's security. Bashing out cameras and hunting down CPU arrays on every level's great because it's an easy thing to do to get you exploring and also forces you to confront Shodan instead of just trying to blitz through objectives. You're not going to get very far with Shodan's security at high levels since she's got every stash, medical area, and major doorway locked down. Another thing I love about Shodan as an antagonist is that she takes you seriously from the start. Once you've woken up, wrecked the first CPU array and medical, and made it out to the elevator, rather than just sit around and wait for you to do the next thing, Shodan bum rushes you with more mutants than you've seen in any other place on medical deck, and because you've literally just entered the level, you have no chance to find and deactivate the cyborg conversion chamber, so if you die here, that's an instant game over. Shodan's gonna pull tricks on you every chance she gets. See a room with a bunch of cameras in it and some corpses that look like they might have something important on them? Guess what? That was a kill box made just for you. Once you're out of the first level, assume every blind corner and doorway is gonna have a bad guy standing right in front of it. Assume that something bad will happen as soon as you start trying to solve a puzzle. Assume that every major plan you have and trying to get into contact with a few surviving people on Citadel Station will have massive complications or outright fail. On top of all that, Shodan will just mess with you sometimes. She'll compliment your sick jumps right before killing you, string you along into believing certain crew members are alive, and she loves to put her face on computer monitors only for a moment just so that you know she's watching. It's also a cool effect that as you decrease the floor security, not only will you see less monsters coming to attack you, but you'll see less of her in general. She'll still find a way to make your life miserable though. Outside of entirely removing the security presence of a level, there's no way to stop respawning monsters. Some of those cameras are also in very hard to get places that need specific items to access them, so good luck completely removing Shodan's presence from the station. Shodan likes to pull all sorts of absolute BS on you, which in any other game I call shenanigans on, but in System Shock, it just works based on the premise that we're aware of a malevolent entity that is aware of our every move and is actively planning against us. I'm almost reminded of like maybe some of the stuff Dark Souls 2 tries to pull with like monster placement and stuff, except that with the context of having an omniscient enemy, it all works. You know, since we're doing a throwback of a game, I want to do a little revisitation on one of the older cooking segments. This is a little something I called the Idiot's Carbonara, which I made a couple years back, which, while not actually a proper carbonara, gets the job done in a fast and simple manner. Like, it's laughably easy to do. I've come a fair bit myself since I first did this, so I thought it'd be fun to revisit it and also help people understand that when I say, yeah, it's the Idiot's Carbonara, I'm not insulting them, that's what I actually called the recipe. So we're gonna need a single package of bacon, preferably as thick as you can get it, a box of spaghetti, some grated Parmesan, and some salt and pepper. For cooking purposes, grab your chef's knife, tongs, a pot, a pan, a heat-resistant measuring cup, and a cutting board. All stuff that's reasonable to expect you to have around the kitchen. We're not using fancy stuff here. If you want to get fancy, you can take a drying rack and line it with some paper towels to help the bacon dry out after you take it out of the pan. This thing is so easy to do that I'm not even bothering to film at the prep counter because there's not really any prep. Like, for reference, the entire filming session of this cooking segment took just over half an hour. Fill up your pot with water. It helps if you run the hot tap so it'll come up faster. Put some salt in that water, cover the pot, and turn the burner on high to get it going. While you're doing that, also turn on the heat for your pan. Now, once the pan heats up a little, start cooking your bacon in small batches of no more than 3 strips at a time. The first batch might need 2 turns as the pan is continuing to heat up, but the rest will only need 1 flip per strip. We want to get this bacon browned and kind of firm, but not crispy. You want to still be able to easily cut it up without the bacon crumbling. Keep cooking your bacon, making sure to drain the grease every other batch or so in a heat-safe container that is positioned well away from any heat sources, and then set them aside to cool a bit on the drying rack or just on the cutting board. It's all good. If all goes well, your pot of water will be well into its boil by the time you're done taking the last strips of bacon out of the pan, setting you up for the next stage. Alright, it's showtime. Take your box of spaghetti and put it in the pot. Set a timer for no more than 7 minutes because we want this to stay in long enough to impart the starchiness of the pasta into the water, but not so long as to fully cook the pasta. While that's going, grate your cheese and chop up your bacon. For this, I actually grated my cheese ahead of time because I needed to use the rind for a soup stock, but you can easily get both tasks done with time to spare before the pasta is ready to be drained. Now for the bacon, take them in those same 3-strip batches, preferably using the one you cooked first because that will be not so hot and burn your fingers, and then cut them a bunch of times short ways before doing 1 or 2 cuts long ways to make some nice little squares. Now set those aside in a bowl or something, and then have your cheese on standby. Okay, pasta's done. Now before you drain it, take your heat-safe measuring cup and scoop out some of that foggy looking water. You don't need a ton, but that starchy liquid's gonna tie the whole thing together. Set that aside, drain your pasta, and then put it right into the pan that you are cooking the bacon in. This should be just enough residual grease to lightly coat the pasta as you mix it around a little, and then it'll be ready. Add in about half of your bacon bits, or maybe 2/3, then just a little bit of that pasta water, and then start alternating between mixing in your Parmesan cheese and cracking fresh pepper over the pasta. Don't worry about if you get some cheese clumps early on. They'll mix in so long as you're patient and persistent. Then, when everything's all mixed in and the noodles have this nice layer of cheese coating on them, portion out all your pasta onto plates and top with whatever Parmesan cheese you have left, more cracked pepper, and the rest of your bacon. If you really want, you also don't need to go nearly as fancy here. This dish is so simple, you can get away with using the cheaper cuts of center cut bacon and powdered Parmesan if you're on a budget. That's what I love about this dish. You can easily feed an entire family of 4 with some generous portions for under $10 if you really needed to. Now that we're done plating up, one last thing for your peace of mind. No cast irons or layers of patina were harmed in the making of this dish. It took a bit of elbow grease, but when everything had cooled down, I alternated between using my chainmail scrubber to loosen the crud off and a steel turner to gently scrape it off, and then everything came off fine. Remember, if you're interested in this recipe or any of the recipes on my channel for the cooking segments I do, they're all available on the Patreon at the $5 tier or higher, along with a ton of other cool benefits that help me keep this channel going. Now let's get back to System Shock. Let's take a sec to appreciate the story. So the premise of System Shock is that you are a hacker. That is your character's only identification. You're off doing hacker things, but then you get backtraced by Trioptimum, the people whose servers you were poking around in. They call the Cyber Police. But the Cyber Police are actually a corporate hit squad who kicks down your door before you can even close your laptop and takes you off to some black site. Lucky for you, you've caught the attention of one of Trioptimum's executives, Edward Diego. Diego says he'll let you off scot-free and even install some top-of-the-line military-grade cyberware into your body so long as you do him a little favor. Come up to Citadel Station, Trioptimum's orbital genetics research facility, and remove all ethical constraints from the on-station AI, SHODAN. Nothing bad could possibly happen because of this. You know, come to think of it, Trioptimum is already a megacorp in a cyberpunk setting where presumably corporations have more power than governments, and they're already operating on an orbital station that is most likely out of any nation's jurisdiction on top of that. They're also a corporation that likes making money, so why did SHODAN have ethical constraints in the first place? Yeah, we're getting sidetracked sidetracked here. Okay, time to go into plot details. Spoilers, so go to the timestamp if you don't want them. So the hacker wakes up, kitted out in the finest cyberware, only to find that no one is around except for these psychotic mutants all wandering about the place. Through piecing together information across the levels of the station, he learns that shortly after he went under, Shodan started getting a little weird. You see, presumably the removal of the ethical constraints was meant for Shodan to rapidly accelerate her genetic testing in the Citadel Station's 4 major groves, getting her to ignore scientific ethics in the name of producing stuff faster to give Trioptimum a huge edge and a big fat bonus. Shodan does do that, but she also does a whole lot of other stuff. It started small at first. The computer started to inject random numbers into the code, which made it harder for the engineers to see what was going on. Suddenly, the passcodes to vital parts of the station were being displayed on screens in the elevator lobby. And then things got spicy. All the groves were getting pretty wild at this point, with Gorilla Tiger hybrids and Audrey 2s all over the place, which, well, was kind of part of the plan. But the Beta Grove was now so bad to the point that it was too toxic for people to enter and was beginning to become infested with this weird fleshy substance. The reactor that kept the station going was suddenly starting to overproduce and spew out tons of excess radiation into the area surrounding it, and oops, it turns out Shodan also issued a recall on all hazard suits a while back so that no one could interfere with the reactor or her experiments in the grove. Oh yeah, and the station's defense system is now shooting down any shuttles trying to go in or out. It's at this point that what Shodan is doing is becoming obvious, as she's subtly made it pretty much impossible for anyone to do anything about it. She's hijacked the ship's orbital laser, which they are just allowed to have for some reason, and is picking out targets. Some executives get the idea to try and escape by getting onto one of the less messed up groves and jettisoning it out of the station. But Shodan pulls a fun little prank on them and disables all life support in that grove just as it's being launched. It's at about this time that you wake up. You see, Diego was just gonna kill you after you did your little job for him, but he decided to let the surgery go ahead and just keep you in that coma as an insurance policy if things got a little too spicy, and well, they did. Time to get to work. After an elaborate series of events, you power up the station's energy shields and manually fire the orbital laser right into the shields to break it, negating that threat. But Shodan's got other plans. She also has a plan to take her experiments in the Beta Grove and transport them onto Earth, where they can propagate and she can remake humanity as she sees fit. The hacker jettisons the Beta Grove into deep space before she can do that though, so all the stuff in that grove is going to be a problem for someone else later on. But wait, there's more. Shodan realized she can just download herself onto the Earth's internet and effectively do what she's doing at Citadel Station on a global scale where there's no one person that could possibly stop her. Thank goodness this cyberpunk future still runs on dial-up or something, because the hacker blows up all the outbound transmitters before she can get herself onto Earth. Shodan is now pissed. She sends a heavily modified Edward Diego after you, because apparently Diego just capitulated to Shodan's self-proclaimed godhood, but he's no match against the hacker because he's got a Magpulse, and the Magpulse will stun lock him, and the Flèche mows down everything else. You advance to the bridge, and despite everything Shodan's done to try and stop you, including a hellish maze where a bunch of exploder robots are constantly respawning, where you have to solve a wire puzzle, you get to her inner sanctum, and the final confrontation is in that cyberspace minigame you do when you hack. Now, I've intentionally neglected to mention this up until this point, but hacking, quote unquote, in System Shock instances you into these weird wireframe levels that kind of play like 6-degree shooters a la Descent that are really, really hard to control. There's also a lot of flashing lights and like rapidly moving like textures and stuff in this wireframe, which I think might be an epilepsy hazard, so I thought it was better to leave them out whenever possible. They also just suck in general and are often a damage tax, because every time you fail one, you take a big chunk of your health. I try not to think about them very much because, if anything, they're the one thing System Shock does poorly. But behold the origin of crappy hacking minigames. I guess it makes sense that we need to go inside of the computer to truly kill Shodan, but I really just wish there was another way to end it. You take out the big bad and everyone lives happily ever after, until someone finds that grove that you jettisoned. You owe it to yourself to play the original System Shock, especially if you love games like Thief, Deus Ex, or Prey. Heck, some people consider Prey 2017, also sometimes referred to as Typhon on this channel, to be a truer successor to System Shock than its actual successor, BioShock, was. The controls are a little scary at first, but thanks to Night Dive's modernizations in the Enhanced Edition, it's easy to master the controls by the time you're out of medical, and I was not expecting the gunplay to be this good. I want to thank you all for watching, as I always do. So thank you for watching. I really wanted to get this video out because a quick look at my calendar shows I'm gonna be busy for the next 30 days. I can't wait to play all of these, except for maybe Redfall, which I'm worried about that one. As I write this, we are almost a week out from launch, and there are still no recommended specs on PC, and in light of the announcement that the Xbox version will only run at lower frame rates on launch is giving me a bad case of the worries on top of the worries I already got from seeing the gameplay we've seen so far. Whatever, we've got time, like a few days admittedly. If it sucks, we'll just do Arx Fatalis. So don't forget to subscribe to see all that cool stuff that might not be a big worry, and no matter what you do, be it painting, drawing, sculpting out of tinfoil, or filming yourself doing cool skateboard tricks, whatever you do, it is art, not content. Content is a slimy word that is taken on a meeting that sandblasts off all of your creativity, your ideas, and your personal input that is you and turns it into a gray slop meant to be mindlessly consumed instead of enjoyed by people who will truly appreciate it. And I don't think I need to tell you that that is wrong. Your art is a reflection of you and the nature of its creation, and you deserve better than to be whittled down to content. So get out there and fight against content, and fight for your art. Stay saucy, everyone. We catch the Chonkulus away from his pillow, and his only activity, snacking. Oh no, you've been found eating snacks, not even a minute after it dispenses. Boy's just going to town. I'm gonna put my foot near you. Oh. Feats to investigate. But he is not deterred. Oh, I'm not touching him, but he doesn't care. He's just in the zone. I wonder if he'll clean his whole bowl after this. Oh, he notices. He's like, what are you doing? I am snacking here. Do not disturb me. Jesus, like we never feed you. Gonna have to shell for the Patreon more. Get the money to get you one of those cat wheels. Wait, are you almost finished? Did you eat almost all the snacks? No, I'm not popping the thing open. We don't need snack inspectors. Okay, look at you. I appreciate the restraint. Gonna go clean off your chunkly paws. Oh, now that the snacks have been consumed, there's time for smells. Go get some exercise or something. Don't just stare off into the abyss. Hey, he's walking. That's better than nothing.